You're not Brad.
No. Brad's at camp. I'm stuck here, but I'm practicing my sleight of hand.
You're not Brad.
You're not Kyler.
Yes, I am.
If you're Kyler, where's your signature beige hat?
It's right.
Oh! Scaredy cat? Why are you so afraid?
I think I need to lay down.
Our good question for today comes from the Gospel of Matthew. Now, if you remember back to week 1 of our Good Question series, we talked about how the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke are more similar in writing than the Gospel of John, and for this reason, they're called the Synoptic Gospels.
Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called the Synoptic Gospels because they overlap in a bunch of places, and they all share the same perspective of telling the life and ministry of Jesus from the earth upwards, whereas John starts in heaven and works his way downwards. And this passage, the story of Jesus calming the storm, is found in all 3 Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
We encourage you to go and pause the video here and go read of these accounts on your own. So from Matthew 8:23-27, Mark 4:35-41, and Luke 8:22-25.
Assuming now that you've read all 3 accounts, you probably have realized that when we come to Mark's Gospel, we get a little bit more information than in Matthew and Luke, such as the fact that there were other boats there. Now, this is one of those things that, as it's not included in the other 2 Gospels and there's not much mention of it in Mark, we do not have an answer for who's in these boats or whether or not these boats turned back when the storm hit. And scholars just don't know what the answer here is, and it is not central to the main purpose of this text.
Mark 4 is all happening in the same day. And so from this passage, we learn that this is happening in the evening of that day. Because of this, we can know that before this storm is happening, Jesus is preaching on a boat to the people on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Set in the hills of northern Israel, the Sea of Galilee is near 700 feet below sea level. It's about 8 miles wide and more than 12 miles long from north to south. In places, the sea plunges to depths of 200 feet. The sea's location made it subject to sudden and violent storms. Storms often developed when an east wind dropped cool air over the warm air rising from the sea. This sudden change produced surprisingly furious storms in a short time.
Now that we know a little bit more about the Sea of Galilee, let's talk about what was in the Sea of Galilee, which was, well, water. Now, water in the Bible is used for symbolism for both good and bad. And in this specific passage, we see water in a more negative context in the case of the storm. Now, the symbolism of water is actually a huge conversation, and we could spend a long time talking about it. But today we're just going to focus on the negative that water represents in Scripture. In Jesus' day, people often feared large bodies of water. They referred to the sea as an abyss and saw it as a symbol of chaos and hell. In fact, fishermen often avoided the deep water, which would help explain why the disciples are so scared in the boat with Jesus. In Revelation, we see this idea taken even further when the seas represent various tribulations for God's people. With the view of the waters representing unrest, chaos, and tribulation, why are Jesus' actions significant? Well, they are very significant, and they are significant in some pretty cool ways, going all the way back to the creation story in Genesis 1. A big portion of the creation account shows God exercising absolute control over water, and having authority over and bringing order to this symbol of chaos. We even further learn in Psalm 77 that the waters and the deep fear God. With this new information, we see that Jesus' actions in a literal sense are a direct representation of his divinity, and in a symbolic sense show us that the things that we fear, the things that make us afraid, actually are afraid of the one who is fighting for us, Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. With all this information in mind, let's turn to our good question. You of little faith, why are you so afraid?
And so we ask you, what are you so afraid of? And why are you so afraid?
And do you know with full conviction that Jesus has authority over anything that causes you fear? We encourage you to be praying over and thinking about these questions and this passage as we come into Sunday morning.
You're not Tyler.
We got it.